Hi, I want to tell you about food and toxic family systems coming from decades of personal experience and decades of observing friends and people close to me exhibiting eating disorders and other similar states in connection to their familial situations. I've personally not seen this topic discussed anywhere nearly often enough. In fact, usually when somebody has an eating disorder, then that person gets treated for mental health issues that are apparently causing this eating disorder. So that becomes the individual's problem and illness, some kind of flaw in their mental state. Or the other common scenario that I've seen quite often as well is when this sort of eating disorder takes the form of an obsession with clean eating, and then the person also gets an interest in spirituality and yoga and raw food and maybe even some woo-woo. And then for their family, they become this black sheep who is acting insane. And so this person and their family enter into many years of this kind of argument where the family won't accept this lifestyle, and depending on the family, they would either try to be aggressive about it and intervene in that individual's life, or not do anything about it but be unaccepting and judgmental from a distance, which is still like a less visible form of ostracizing, and it does still keep that individual at a distance from their family and not having that acceptance from them. And both individuals in this case would be feeling ostracized, would be feeling like they're trying to fight for something that is theirs, and they're trying to fight the people who are closest to them for this. And it's very draining, it's unresolvable, it's a pretty miserable place to be for them. But of course they can't exit that dynamic by doing what to them would feel like betraying themselves and folding to their family's way of living. So that feels nearly impossible, even from the inside, and especially from the inside. But even if the lifestyle that the individual has chosen to feel cleaner and to feel removed from whatever it is they find problematic in their family's lifestyle is actually harmful to them. And they also can't really see that it is harmful to them, because they do end up in a mental state where their reality is distorted to a degree. And here I want to give an example of the kind of disordered eating patterns that I mean, although it's just one example of many possibilities. So it's, for example, one thing to be vegetarian for a multitude of reasons, which of course can and will breed misunderstandings with meat-eating families. And it's another thing to practice raw food eating, where raw food is 100% of your diet year round and you live in a cold climate. So in the second scenario, there are a lot of irrational beliefs that would be making the individual choose that lifestyle, and the lifestyle then very quickly becomes directly harmful to the individual. But the mental state of them is such that they refuse to see and acknowledge this harm that's starting to happen to their body. In other words, there are ways to go about these lighter diets that are more healthy, and ways to go about them that are less healthy. So from a psychologist's or a nutritionist's perspective, there may be a problem, or maybe there isn't a problem with how the individual is choosing to eat their food. But I've seen a number of variants of this kind of behavior, and I've been one of them. So I actually want to highlight the part of this scenario that is to do with the familial and systematic dynamic happening between the individual and those that they are directly related to. Because in all the different cases that I've seen where an individual desires to have a cleaner diet and more control over their life and an interest in personal growth and spirituality, that somehow was rooted in the rich black soil of a heavily toxic family system, which makes perfect sense if, like me, you understand that human beings are related to each other on so many levels, and many ways in which we function as collectives. So if there is a dynamic in a family, it affects all of its members. If there is a deep dark secret in a family, even if most of them have forgotten about it or don't know about it, it affects all of those family members. If there is an illness in the family, it gets passed on through generations. It keeps on affecting all the family members. Some would end up experiencing it, others would have to take care of the individual who has it, etc. So all of these things. But it's not just about someone, for example, growing up with a certain toxic type of communication happening around them and then deciding, well, I'm not like that, I don't want that, and then going about their way not being like that. Unfortunately, that's not how it works. And how it does work is that unfortunate dynamic will be trying to reproduce itself inside this new individual who doesn't want it. For the sake of example, it will be taking a new form on or the same old form, and it may appear down the line later in life, for example, but it will come up. Now, generally speaking, psychotherapy does deal with these kinds of inherited toxic patterns, and there are also therapeutic methods such as family constellations that are somewhat more efficient at fixing issues that had been passed down through multiple generations. That's a side note on the probably most efficient way to get help in a scenario like this. Now, to sum up, the individual desire to eat clean, when it becomes an obsession or an all-encompassing lifestyle, which can take a few different forms, is in my experience directly related to the individual experiencing heavy psychological processes being passed down to them from their family system. Of course, this doesn't happen consciously or directly. It is just a natural process that happens as we live our lives. So, as the individual is experiencing a feeling of heavier energy inside themselves, their body and mind responds by wanting to become lighter, and then they are driven to manipulating their food choices and or an interest in spirituality and various practices such as fasting, for example, which are all healthy when done in a healthy way. However, what tends to happen is this response. So the clean eating impulse is a response to the source issue of an unhealthy issue pressing down on the individual. And as the situation does not resolve itself, and it often does not resolve itself because one individual's fasting or quote-unquote clean eating isn't enough to resolve such things usually, then this whole dynamic persists for however many years. The issues keep pressing down on the individual's psyche, then the individual keeps restricting their food. It goes on and on and on and on because the issue isn't resolved and the dynamic keeps repeating itself. And at some point, then the food choices that the individual is making to temporarily resolve what is happening for themselves become unhealthy for various reasons. This depends on the specific case, but a person over time may become either deficient in nutrients or perhaps even macros, or even just be eating food that is severely unbalancing to their particular body, which would actually cause new health issues. Well, I say new, but that would usually actually be the new physical form that those inherited familial patterns would then take, and this is a topic for another day. And that's it, that's the situation. The choices that we are drawn to make have a deeper reasoning behind them. They are often linked to your body and your entire system attempting to find balance. And at the same time, all these things, these attempts to find balance, can lead to unhealth and perpetuating unhealth if they are not explored consciously and in a deeper way from time to time, which is what we should all be doing with every aspect of our lives anyway. Thank you for listening.